It's about nation branding, country branding, place branding, or destination branding, as we call it. And branding almost seems like a secret weapon. A powerful country brand is supposed to translate into a better perception of the country. It is supposed to increase exports, foreign investments, and inward tourism. There are 4 dimensions of nation branding. The first one is public diplomacy. It encompasses the dimension of international relations that go beyond traditional diplomacy and the cultivation of public opinion in other countries. The second one is promoting exports by branding the origin of a product and using this as a quality signal. And then we have foreign direct investment, and as a 4th dimension, tourism. Developing a country brand begins by crafting an umbrella concept that will cover those 4 dimensions of country branding. What we actually find, though, is that most countries only clearly brand themselves for tourism purposes. Therefore, I will focus on tourism to outline the main ideas on nation branding. So first, let's have a look on brands. What do they mean? How do they work? Then we will have a look at the brand potential of African countries based on empirical findings. We will learn that strong brands have a fit between identity and image. And then we will have a look at how to do this, how to create a strong brand identity by having a short look at some role models too. And I will finish with some theoretical and practical implications on the matter. So we all know that brands work for consumer goods and services. The key question is if this concept can be transferred to countries. And can it be transferred in a successful way? Maybe it is just an urban marketing myth. We will see. I would like to start with a little riddle.
We have a little problem here. We've got a technical problem here.
Okay, so you have some time to wonder what this is. Okay, so this is a test if it works, though. So anyone who has got an idea, please raise your hands. Just let me see. Do you have an idea? Just so kind. Okay. And I heard it before. You are right. It's a panda. Yeah. And a panda, as you can see, is the logo used by the Worldwide Fund for Nature. The Worldwide Fund for Nature is a German-based foundation that is engaged in protection of wildlife and the environment. Ideally, and that was the test, if it works in a global matter, ideally you recognize the logo, and ideally you have an idea what this organization stands for and what it is doing. The WWF is a service brand. The term brand has its origin in the US. Cowboys used to brand their cattle in order to indicate to whom it belonged. Basically, brands can be seen as tagged products or services. Take some brown fluid, load it with sugar to some mysterious recipe, put it into a rolling bottle, add red color, white Art Nouveau lettering, and you end up with Coca-Cola. Change the contents, turn the color into gold, add a mark designation and a logo, and you have African wine. At the same time, a brand is a trademark that indicates the origin of a product and its creator. Made in Germany used to be a seal of quality. I'm not quite sure if this holds true now. But anyway, it was created, this made in Germany, in the late 19th century when the British Merchandise Marks Act was imposed in order to prevent foreign imports. Over the time, the meaning changed completely. So brands have an economic dimension, but a legal dimension too. Registered trademark, this is what the little R stands for. It is prohibited to copy a registered trademark. And every year, brand piracy causes economic damage worldwide to the amount of 400 billion US dollars. That makes an estimated 10% of global trade. But we want to talk about economic advantages, and our topic is nation branding. So just try to fake the Egyptian pyramids. What we need is another definition of brands, namely a brand as an image in our heads. So branding is not what you think about your country and are telling other people about it. Branding is aligning the picture others have about your country and what they are saying about it to the way you would like to be seen. Let us take a look at a consumer brand like Coca-Cola, Apple, or McDonald's. How does it work? So first of all, brands give us, as consumers, orientation in a market. They reduce complexity by condensing an abundance of information to information chunks. A brand is a shortcut to a purchase decision. Brands carry a quality pledge. Even if you have never bought a certain brand before, probably you will have trust in it. And more than that, we identify with certain brands as they stand for a certain lifestyle. It is prestigious if you can afford a luxury brand. Even if you are more modest, maybe you have to wear the right sneakers to be accepted within your peer group. The brand leader, on the other hand, profits from a strong reputation of its brand because it distinguishes the product from others. It creates preferences and enhances the willingness to pay for it. Brands create value that can be measured in terms of shareholder value. So the most valuable global brand in the world is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has an estimated brand equity of 70.5 billion US dollars that is driven by a brand promise of fun, freedom, spirit, and refreshment. And this resonates the world over. If you pass these functions on nation brands, the case is similar and the expectations are clear. A nation brand is supposed to foster tourism and investment by building up a high profile and good reputation. The benefits hoped for include the ability to win more investment business because the country image says the right things about taxation, labor skills, safety, the environment, and political stability. A strong focused country brand strategy not only strengthens the international image, though, but it also realigns the citizens' mindset about their country. It builds up patriotism and pride. Which are the most appreciated country brands worldwide? So, due to a survey called Future Brand 2010, the country brand index CBI, Canada is the world's #1 country brand. It ranks #1 in brand image. And what do you think? What is the African country that ranks highest? Egypt, you think? Tunisia? Other ideas? South Africa? No. No. Morocco, not bad. Morocco, though. Egypt, not bad either. It's Mauritius. It's Mauritius on 21. And the next one is South Africa on rank 31. But altogether, and that is remarkable, I'm sorry to say that, but Africa is and else also ran in the survey. But anyway, there are some highlights. So there are several subcategories in this survey, and Mauritius is the #1 brand all over the world for tourism. And that explains the overall ranking too. There's another list of brands for heritage and culture, and on that list, Egypt ranks #8. On the other hand, there are 6 African countries among the worst 10 performing country brands, with Zimbabwe on top. So what do people think if they think of African countries? Well, they think of warfare, famine, HIV, and poverty. These are strong negative images that are not easy to overcome. If you are lucky, Angelina Jolie, Madonna, or George Clooney appear on the scene and ennoble the disaster. But probably they will not improve your country's image, but theirs. Africa's dominant image has been created by charity brands. Think of the 1985 Life Aid to provide food for Ethiopia. They had Life Aid in 25, Make Poverty History, Sir Bono and Sir Bob, and some celebrity adoptions in the last years. They all contributed to a one-sided image that is reflected in empirical findings. We all know the stereotypes. Worldwide, the British are perceived as proud, civilized, cultured, and cold, but witty. Japan is seen as efficient, industrious, competitive, innovative, and Japan specializes, as we all know, or supposed to know, in electronics. Germany is described as efficient, industrious, rational, and cold. I mean, that's no wonder with this weather outside. But Germany is good at engineering. The US, on the other hand, is perceived as competitive, adventurous, sociable, and fun-loving, and strong in services. And what about Africans? Africans are considered primitive, superstitious, irrational, incapable to plan or care for themselves, lazy, weak, poor, and barely managing to survive. And the mentioned adjectives are associated with national character. Those images are, in fact, stereotypes. They carry prejudices, they are highly subjective, and they are based on impressions rather than on facts. As far as Africa is concerned, they have a strong racist component. Nonetheless, those images are pervasive. In May 27, Interbrand Sampson did a survey on how African nations are perceived. Aside from the size of the sample, I didn't find any information about the methodology, including who were the respondents. However, the results are quite interesting. Thinking of Africa, which countries come to your mind? This is a typical question to measure spontaneous awareness. What do you think? What are the countries people think of if you ask this kind of question about spontaneous awareness? South Africa. Right. South Africa is the front runner with 81% of the entries, followed by Kenya, Egypt, Nigeria, and Morocco. Interestingly, with the exception of Nigeria, those are the countries that contribute, due to the survey, to the positive image of Africa the most. So if you see this clockwise, it's South Africa with 23 of the answers. It's Egypt, Morocco, Kenya, and so on. Among the countries that have the most negative impact on African image are clockwise, Rwanda, Somalia, Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, Sudan, and Zimbabwe. And this is no coincidence. Those countries represent negative associations which are linked to Africa altogether. Poverty is on top of the list. Every second respondent links Africa to poverty. And other issues are sickness and poor healthcare, it's war, it's political conflicts, it's famine, and human rights abuses, and corruption. Other aspects, such as poor education, colonialism, and drought, were hardly mentioned. They are in the survey, but I did leave them out here. What does the other side of the coin look like? Africa's perceived position is strongly defined by its natural attributes. Almost every second respondent had safari and wildlife in mind, thinking of Africa. 1/3 of the respondents mentioned culture and history. And there are words like wild, exotic, people in the community, landscapes, resources, dance and music, and so on. And other items such as tribes, colors, birth of man, and sports, they all scored less than 10% at the time. In the next figure, Africa is represented by the black pillars. And you can see that compared to the Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, and South America, respondents regarded Africa as having the lowest political stability and economic potential. The fact, on the right, that there is barely any difference perceived with cultural heritage is a bright spot. Nevertheless, each of these 3 dimensions must be considered and addressed in creating and changing a country's image, respectively. Using this kind of research, let's say it may be quantitative or qualitative, these kinds of research methodologies will help you to find out how your country is perceived both internally by your citizens and externally by people abroad you want to influence. Regarding African countries or the continent as a whole, there seems to be a gap between brand identity and brand image. Identity is the way you define yourself. It's the way you would like to be seen by others. Image is the way you are seen by others. So a country image can be understood as the sum of beliefs and impressions people hold about places. Images represent a simplification of a large number of associations and pieces of information connected with a place. They are a product of the mind trying to process and pick out essential information from huge amounts of data about a place. And with strong brands, there is a fit between identity and image. So African countries probably are no strong nation brands, although they have high potentials, such as South Africa, Egypt, or Kenya. Brand loyalty requires trust. It's the same with consumer brands. But how can you build up trust when you are linked to riots, violation of human rights, corruption, and disease? Trust begins with knowledge, and knowledge arises from publicity and awareness. If you want to change people's images about Africa, you have to inform them, you have to enlighten them, and you have to tell them a different story. However, branding is no window dressing, and it does not imply sunshine journalism either. An effort to brand Africa and her countries doesn't mean glossing over the troubled issues to promote only the good, but it is a tactic of balancing perceptions. It is difficult to overcome prevailing images of Africa and its her nations in particular. People who are convinced and confident that this is possible usually come from public relations agencies that get wind of an order. Since this matter has come up, there have been expensive campaigns all over the world that have marvelously failed, such as Cool Britannia at the turn of the century. Those brands, and there are other examples, those brands turned out to be not inclusive enough. They were superimposed and reflected national characteristics that were not shared by the majority of people. However, there are some success stories too, such as repositioning Spain. Until 1975, Spain was an isolated, backward, poverty-stricken dictatorship. Later on, it suffered terror from some separatist groups. In 1982, Spain started a successful campaign with the catchy slogan, "Spain, everything under the sun." It used a sun symbol by Miro as its visual identifier, and above all, Spain reinvented herself. Today, Spain is perceived as a democracy, an active and lively member of the European Union, with a decent standard of living, considerable cultural contributions, and lots of tourist attractions. So Spain might serve as a role model for young nations that attained independence very late or seek up to build democratic standards. Other countries, such as Scotland, show that even smaller countries may be able to gain a niche position in the global arena, even if this position is made of whiskey, kilts, and sparsely populated highlands. As far as Africa is concerned, there are stylish approaches to be found on the internet, such as the Brand Africa project, interestingly a registered trademark itself, or the Brand Africa initiative launched in September this year. What are efforts like these about? Branding is not only about designing logos or clever advertising, it is about creating an identity. Branding means building up a brand identity and cultivating it over time. The identity of a nation brand is the consistent sum of all enduring features that distinguish this nation from others, thereby representing its brand personality. The idea is that a nation has an identity and a personality just like a human being. Just figure your home country. Figure it as a person. What would he or she be like? Modern or traditional? Sociable or loner? Serious or cheerful? Progressive or conservative? And so on. Important components of a brand identity in terms of nations are a country's name, symbols, take flags for instance, geography, history, culture, its people, and behavior, for instance, taking leadership on the continent in some matter, and last but not least, communication. But not every country has pyramids, hosts a World Cup, or holds the family roots of a very powerful US president. By the way, this feature doesn't hold for brand identity anyway because it's perishable. Destination characteristics that may be a foundation for branding, for nation branding, are climate, the geographical position of a country, a beautiful landscape or other natural gifts, spectacular wildlife, cultural aspects such as distinctive features in visual arts, music, literature, architecture, or cuisine, and, of course, archaeological heritage. There may be typical products, and there may be some famous citizens, such as politicians or celebrated athletes, or some other attractions. A country is defined by a collection of these characteristics. However, a country brand must hold some unique association for people. Whatever is exceptional and offers an emotional pull is suitable for representing the quintessence of brand identity. Culture may be the variable that offers the highest potential in distinguishing one country from another. It's a direct reflection of a nation's uniqueness. A brand has to be distinctive. It is important that an African national brand is clear on its position as part of the African continent, while offering something distinct from her neighbors. The nation is the sub-brand with a larger continent brand. Western media coverage tends to throw 53 countries into one basket. Therefore, potential ambassadors of a positive image are suffering from negative image spillovers. Some characteristics are attached to the whole continent, but they do not hold true at all for many nations. So the features you choose for your country brand must be relevant for your target group. For instance, you have to be aware of the decision criteria tourists apply when they consider a journey. And typical tourism benchmarks are accommodation, transport infrastructure, security, and hospitality. And note that different places attract different tourists. Some are into archaeological sites, others enjoy natural attractions. So this is a case for market segmentation. You have to be specific about what you want to market and to whom. Another target group is made up by investors. And which are the top three investment attributes that are important to investors? There's another index. It's called Interbrand Samson's African Brand Investment Index, published this year. And this index highlights political stability, economic growth prospects, and currency stability. Critical to the creation of a durable destination brand is the identification of the brand's values, the translation of those values into a suitable, emotionally appealing personality, and the targeted and efficient delivery of that message. Communication highlights the specific benefits of a country. Many countries make strong efforts in getting attention by tourism by campaigning. But usually, classical advertising is a waste of money. There are some smarter ways. Let's take the Soccer World Cup and the effects it had on the image of African countries. Research reveals that hosting the tournament has given South Africa a valuable reputational boost. Remarkably, though, that where South Africa's overseas reputation seems to have improved, locals did not rate their country highly, and they even rated it lower than before the event. I reveal the reason why later. Basically, events offer perfect conditions for branding. They carry strong pictures, and they are loaded with emotion. Let's have a look at another communication instrument that can be applied in nation branding. When was the last time you went to the movies? If you were watching some Hollywood blockbuster, I suppose they had a famous soft drink in it, a packet of cigarettes, a computer, a cell phone, some fancy cars and sneakers, or any other props. And I bet it was not compulsory for the understanding of the storyline that you came to see the logo of the producer. And this is called product placement. If you present a simple ad to people, they will recall 26% of the brands later on. If people are presented If those brands are presented as a product placement in a TV series or a movie, people will keep twice as much of the brands in mind, 56%. And this works with destinations too. It's called country placement or landside placement. In the 80s, there was a successful soap opera on German TV. Great example for this. The storyline was located in the Black Forest, which is a tourist destination in the southwest of the country. Therefore, maybe some of you know that, therefore the series was called the Black Forest Hospital. As a tourist destination, the area was hopelessly old-fashioned, the opposite of hip. Aside from that, at that time, forest dieback ruled the media coverage. However, when the series was broadcast, overnight stays went up by 10%. You're certainly wondering, what does she tell us about the beautiful but boring Black Forest? Well, just think of New Zealand. Basically, the same story. New Zealand got a huge push in terms of tourism by the movie The Lord of the Rings that coincided with a global branding initiative under the slogan 100% Pure New Zealand 10 years ago. Namibia launched a new branding in April 2010 with the slogan Endless Horizons. And the Namibia Tourism Board demonstrates how to use cooperation with film studios such as 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers for cross-promotion campaigns. The biggest problem in communicating a nation brand is that successful branding needs a simple message, and a simple message is clearly impossible to create with a complex phenomenon as a multifaceted nation. It is not easy to convey an in-depth understanding of a nation's distinctive qualities and characteristics. That is why it is far more difficult to obtain a fully integrated communication mix for a nation brand than it is in branding consumer goods. Branding products and branding countries have a lot in common. The techniques are similar, but there are some obstacles and challenges in country branding because places are kinds of composite products whose components can hardly be controlled. Aside from a distinctive, high-profile identity, other conditions must be fulfilled to create a strong brand. Its reciprocity, its consistency, continuity, and credibility. Brand identity doesn't exist by itself. It emerges by and by, because there's an interaction between branding efforts and the perception within target groups. If people do not get in touch with the country and have no reason to deal with it or to collect any information about this interaction doesn't take place. This is an obstacle for countries whose international awareness is low. The development of a brand idea and positioning it positively and clearly differentiates a country from every other. The brand identity enables the development of messaging to the various audiences previously identified. The message created for tourism will be different from the message you create for investment. However, they will both portray the same overall brand positioning. But it seems to be impossible to create a simple, one-dimensional core message which will get across a nation's complexity. It is much easier to brand an individual product than a nation, because the product is limited to a manageable number of characteristics you build its identity on, whereas the image of a nation is multifaceted and ultimately uncontrollable. In fact, you have little management control over country brands. However, you have to be consistent, building an integrated picture, then always backing it with quality. Creating an unambiguous image of a whole nation, even more so a clear picture of a whole continent, is not easy though. The brand's positioning must be clearly articulated and shared across the whole nation. Creating a branding program for a country requires an integration program that most countries simply do not have. This entails the ability to act and speak in a coordinated and repetitive way about themes that are the most motivating and differentiating for the whole country. That is why nation branding is a joint effort. Place marketing involves multiple stakeholders, often with competing interests. To develop a country brand, you require having the cooperation and involvement of representatives of government, business, the arts, education, and, after all, the media. The press disperses a country's problems and often accounts for a perpetuation of stereotypes, but it can help to build a positive image as well. You cannot impose a nation brand on a country, but you can find out the aspects that appeal to the widest group of people and that are different and special. Unfortunately, most governments currently do not bother to consult the citizens when putting together a national branding campaign. However, one major problem remains. A nation is no soft drink. You simply cannot control the product and the way it is perceived worldwide. There may be environmental factors that keep tourists away that are beyond your influence, such as natural disasters. Products can be discontinued, they can be modified, withdrawn from the market, relaunched, and repositioned, or replaced by improved products. Places do not have most of these choices. Their image problems may be found in structural problems that take years to fix. A country image shall be appealing and distinctive, but it needs substance. An image needs to be close to reality, and it has to be believable. Zimbabwe, you remember, top of the bad list. Zimbabwe launched a new destination brand in October this year. The new slogan is Zimbabwe, a world of wonders. The old one, even better, Zimbabwe, Africa's paradise, has been discarded into the National Archives. They have the Victoria Falls and other things. One of the natural wonders of the world, but the persons in charge apparently noticed that the idea of a paradise is not credible in a country that is known for an ailing economy, poor infrastructure, for the absence of the rule of law, disrespect for property and human rights, and surge in crime. No paradise at all. Trying to advertise a country away from the truth is no branding, it is propaganda. It does not have any sustainable effect. The execution of a branding strategy takes time. A brand is built one piece at a time. An ad may create short-term attention, but campaigning alone will not create trust and it will not create brand loyalty. If you concentrate on communication in terms of marketing, you just simply stay at the surface. There's more about nation branding than advertising. If the focus is only on tourism, you will culpably neglect other industries. As I said at the beginning, nation branding has 4 dimensions, including public diplomacy. Many African governments embark on futile, expensive branding exercises to remake their country's image without addressing the core issues that are at the center of their nation's demise. A country's politics, its economy, the legal and social environment all contribute to national identity and reputation. Africa is simultaneously trying to present two incompatible ideas. On the one hand, a desirable destination, and on the other hand, a charity case. Just consider the image of an African country which is getting aid is compatible with a country that needs investment. To my mind, it is not. While tourism players are busy creating a perception package around a country's beautiful resorts, politicians may be undoing the efforts of the tourism industry through poor brand management. The consistency in executing of a branding strategy shouldn't be affected by the day-to-day changes in the political atmosphere. Successful nation branding is about achieving a balance between applying cutting-edge public relations approaches to a marketing problem and the practical policy of managing local, regional, and national politics. There's a boost in the discourse on nation branding, but questions of internal marketing and holding multiple stakeholder dialogues in the policy arena are completely neglected. But this is the challenge. How do you take both business players and citizens along with a strategy like that? Let's get back to South Africa. I told you that South African citizens give their country bad grades in spite of a successful soccer World Cup. What's the reason why? They do so because South Africa's worst attributes include ineffective government. You cannot build up trust when economic and political surroundings are not stable. Taken seriously, nation branding has a political dimension. It is not about well-prepared, glossy brochures, but it is about good governance. If you leave politics out of the equation, you will not end up with strong national identity. You will end up with a serious personality disorder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sandberg. Again, let's give Professor Sandberg another round of applause.
Just grabbing a pen, that's it, for the question.
Okay. At this particular time, we'd like to go into questions or comments. Again, I always excuse me, like to remind of the ICD 20-second, 30-second rule, even though I know it does not work. But we're trying to get succinct, and let's try and apply what you call the rise of Africa in the way we ask our questions. So at least each day or each presentation, we're trying to get to a point to allow others to be able to participate. And really, that's what it's about. If we had all day, you could have 20 minutes. Second request is, unless it's inconvenient medically or otherwise, since we're recording, if you can stand up when you're doing your presentation, and also separate your comments from your questions. So if you're making a comment, say, my comments are, and then that way will help Professor Sandberg. If you do get to your question, just say, and my question is, and then state your question. So we'll take 3 at a time, and if we do have any participants. Okay.
Thank you, Prof. I have to stand up. At the beginning, you mentioned 4 dimensions of branding. And in the context of Africa, it seems that there is another dimension you left out, the diaspora. They bring money, they invest, they are tourists, and they have emotional connection. So I just like to ask you why. The other question I have is, in terms of political factors, we know Europe, when they have political factors or political instability, countries like Greece, where there is financial crisis, there is protests, there is terrorism acts, happening and is still continuing. We have Britain, where last parliament, and the parliament is the highest organ, where the whole parliament, if I can say it so, was corrupt. And now you have students protesting everywhere in the country. But yet, that does not affect their image. Thank you.
Any other questions or contributions?
All right. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. My name is Bridget. I'm from Nigeria. Yeah, you mentioned some African nations that are into rebranding, but I didn't hear you talk about Nigeria. I remember that last year, Minister for Information and Communication, Professor Dora Akumili, launched a rebranding product where we talk about Nigeria, great nation, good people. I didn't hear you mention it. Is it that our own rebranding effort is not recognized globally, or what? Thank you.
Good morning, Professor. Question, I also didn't notice Israel, who has a terrible international reputation and brand, most often identified with the conflict with the Palestinians and the Intifada. And I know there was a global focus groups, 30 focus groups set around the world, and they reaffirmed that fact. They've been vigorously trying to re-image in the branding process. And also our community in Israel had to do the same process. Initially known as, identified as, who are these outsiders, to be re-identified as a bastion of health within the country. So, but I say that to note that, to reaffirm something you mentioned, the length of time it takes to develop a brand is not an overnight process, but also the question about how much value do you place on the inside-out effect in terms of the importance of how people see themselves and that transmitting or being transformed in that process. How do you rate that in terms of its importance?
We have our 3 questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comments and sharing your ideas with me. I apologize if I couldn't cover any country or mention any country, or even maybe have overlooked several campaigns. You are right that you can draw some conclusion from that, and maybe tell that there is no global impact. Maybe, what did you say, when was the campaign started in Nigeria? Okay, when was it started? When was the campaign launched?
It was launched in
2009. Maybe let's have a look next year, or the next but 1 year, maybe we will notice. But on the other hand, I confess, I didn't do any in-depth research on that, so I can tell. And on the other hand, of course, I try to highlight some perceptions considering Africa and left other nations with serious problems aside, and you were right. There are some nations in Europe, like Greece or even Ireland now, and they will suffer from an image damage because of those economic problems. Probably it will take some time until it shows. And on the other hand, I think that it is very important to have this inside-out effect. To my knowledge, this idea isn't discussed in literature or even in ambitious programs at all. And I think this is important, though, because people of countries, may it be in the diaspora or even if they are at home, I mean, you are not isolated. The people are the ambassadors of a country. So the way they see themselves as a nation may be processed to the outside world and will have an impact on the image. So I think this is very important. And maybe we can sum this up under the aspect of political diplomacy. Though you mentioned in the beginning that and told me about the diaspora and the important impact it has. That's an interesting idea. Maybe it's worthwhile taking as a pillar of its own, considering Africa, but maybe we can sum it up under public diplomacy as well. I'm not certain about that, but would be interesting to discuss about that matter.
Thank you very much. I think we have about another 10 minutes to go, so we'll fit in. We've got 1, 2, and 3.
Thanks, Professor Sandberg. Thank you very much for your presentation. I only have 2 remarks. First, you mentioned how difficult it is for a nation to have the right nation branding. And I think for African nations, it's even more difficult. Just looking at the example of Ghana, when they had their 50th celebration, the government exclusively used Akan symbols, which is the majority of the ethnic groups in Ghana. And all of a sudden, a real discussion came up because all those other minorities came up and said, we're not represented in this. Yep. And it even shows how good the concept is when having a presentation in Ghana, you use the Twi terms Akwaba and Medase in the end for thank you, welcome, and thank you. And I did that one time in a Ghanaian community, and I was punished for that because they said, you cannot do that. You cannot only use Twi. That is not possible here. And just that was the first remark, and the second was also for the organizational part. I would have loved to have your speech and your lecture in the beginning of this week. That would have been really lovely.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Mohamed Lamine. I'm from Senegal. First, I would like to say how I'm really impressed by the quality of your presentation. It's really good. I have 2 questions. The first one is, you have mentioned many elements that impact negatively on the image of a country. Yep. But I would like to know, among these elements, what is the element which can impact more than the others on the image of a country? Mm-hmm. And second, I'm going from here, if you allow me, I would like to do my best to invite you in my country, because I would like you to do this same presentation in front of academics and the politicians, because this is brilliant and they need to get this kind of information.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We will.
Yeah, and if
follow
you
up
can,
on this later on.
if you can be in touch, because I have many
sure.
contacts in our university, and I'm a historian, but I would like people to share with you this kind of information,
yeah,
if it's
maybe
possible.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
My name is Patrick Osakwe. Let me start by thanking you for the presentation, which I found quite interesting. I would like to know what your views are on the role of the media in creating this so-called negative image of Africa. Because, I mean, over the years, we've noticed that there are lots of interesting things happening in Africa, positive things. Yeah. But nobody. It's very hard to get the media to focus on these things. The only thing they're interested in is famine, war, the negative things. So, and these things create a very bad impression outside the continent, especially, in Europe and North America, where people are not used to, Africa as a continent. So I would like to get your views on, what you think, in terms of the role of the media in creating this negative image and what could be done, because it's not just for African countries. I think the responsibility is also on the international community to also get, the media resident in these continents to change their approach, towards reporting incidents that happen in Africa.
Okay. To get back on the first question, though, it's about what aspect might have the strongest impact on a nation's identity or even nation's image. It's hard to tell. And to my knowledge, there are no empirical findings on that. So I would have to guess, and I apologize for not doing so, because I simply can't tell you. There has to be some research done. And I'm not quite sure. Probably it will differ from nation to nation. Maybe a difference if you look at South Africa or Senegal, maybe some completely different pictures. Yeah, we have to do some research on that. Should be interesting. And the same holds true for media coverage. So my problem is that I have a look at the problem from a European point of view. And I can hardly judge international media coverage, but there's another dimension on that, namely media coverage in African countries themselves and media coverage that is perceived on the African continent. So there are several dimensions with that. The problem with media in general is that there are certain rules that make a story interesting. It might be a story that is emotional, maybe attached to sports. See the media coverage on the Soccer World Cup. What else is interesting and positive? Celebrities. I mentioned that. But the most important rule the media and the press follows is good news or no news. And this is quite the same. If you look at Europe or the US or Africa, it's the same rule. So it's pretty difficult, I guess, to take the media along. The problem is if you want to have a free press as a government or as an agency that is supposed to coordinate a national branding campaign, you cannot tell the media which topics to cover and what to write and what pictures to present. That is a problem. But you see, I found in the literature and the coverage of the topic of nation branding that these issues, exactly the questions you ask, are not covered in the discussion at all. So to my mind, the whole discussion is a little bit short-sighted because public relations agencies, well, they deal with public relations and media coverage and things like that, but I'm not quite sure if there are any concepts so far considering this kind of question.
Thank you very much. We'll take about one or two more, and we'd like to go for a break.
Hi, my name is Nudimi Soshopa. I'm from the Kingdom of Swaziland. And what I noticed in your presentation, maybe it was just a conspiracy theory in my mind, was the fact that most of the countries that are most recognizable are the ones that are seen as the hegemonic, sort of dominant countries within the regions. So I was wondering, what would you advise to smaller countries that are within those regions in terms of boosting their brands, you know, if they don't have the same economic capabilities as other countries to invest in their brands?
Mm-hmm.
So, hello. Thank you very much for a very good presentation as well. Actually, I just recently spent some time in Romania. I know it's not the topic, but I felt that people were not very proud of themselves, and it was hard for them to promote their country because, well, I sensed it as not attractive because people were not enthusiastic about it. So how to brand a country when, people don't feel good about their history somehow. Yeah.
Ooh, hopefully this is the final question, and it's always the same. The final questions are the ones I'm not able to answer. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Maybe one I can answer.
Thanks again for your presentation. My question, Riga, is about viral campaigns and a new way of branding a product or branding a country. I've seen in the past few years that there is a market for, say, extreme sports or extreme activities. So I don't know if I'm far off here, but do you think it would be possible for countries in Africa that have civil war, unrest, problems, etc., to embrace that problem and brand the country or brand an aspect of the country without lying, without making a propaganda? You mentioned Zimbabwe saying it's a paradise when it's not. Do you think countries that have this sort of unrest can embrace it? And if yes, which ones and in what way can they try and attract a sort of a market for people who are interested in adventure or in, extreme activities in that sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is perfect ideas and mainly two perfect ideas, namely communication on the World Wide Web and viral marketing campaigns. I'm not quite sure if this is used for country branding, though, but might be an idea. The problem is that viral marketing campaigns are very difficult to control. So you have two problems at the same time. You have a nation brand that is difficult to control with its aspects, and you have a kind of campaigning that is not easy to have under control by itself. I'm not sure if it works, but it might be an idea that can be valuable to discuss. On the other hand, I think what you came up with, for instance, extreme sports, maybe that is an idea for Zimbabwe, diving down the Victoria Falls and things like that as a niche strategy. Maybe this even offers an answer to your question, referring to smaller countries. And remember, it is not always about having a strong nation brand in the eyes of Europeans or maybe US citizens and things like that. Maybe there are other target groups. Maybe it's the smartest way to start with the local arena, maybe the north of Africa, or even Africa as a whole. We used to, from the European point of view, we used to regard Africa as a whole continent and overlooking that there are 53 states in it and 53 countries that like to be branded. I think it is not possible to impose a competition, and we shouldn't do that on countries, but I'm quite sure that even smaller countries can gain some good reputation or find some aspects in their national characteristics that can be valuable and a basis for a strong brand. Just think of Scotland, small country. I'm not quite sure even in Europe if everybody knows where Scotland is located. I'm not quite sure about that. But there are some strong associations, and maybe that is a start, the small ones. So I think the recommendation is not try to overcome South Africa or whoever, but find a way on your own.
Professor Sandberg, Professor Dr. Sandberg, thank you very much for the brilliant presentation. Also to the participants, if we could again give Professor Sandberg a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.